Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Hatherleigh Behavioral Health's Clinical Conversations. I'm your host, Kortney Yasenka. Before we get started, just some housekeeping. Make sure you remain muted for the entire conversation. Feel free to put your chat questions in the chat. We'll be monitoring that throughout the conversation, and we'll also have time at the end for questions and answers. Today, we have Geraldine Walsh. She is the author of Unraveling Motherhood. Understanding your experience through self-reflection, self-care, and authenticity. So, Geraldine, thank you so much for being here, and we really appreciate your time and you sharing your very personal story with us through your book.
Thank you so much for having me, Courtney. I really appreciate it.
So, I'm hoping we can start if you want to tell our audience a little bit about yourself, what motivated you to write this book, and also what you hoped people would get from writing this book. And I should tell you, most of our audience are behavioral health professionals, public health professionals, and we do, work with a lot of families and moms, going through different mental illnesses. So that's kind of our target audience, but we were very excited to hear your story. So thank you.
Thank you. So I'm an Irish author and writer and journalist with I contributed mostly with the Irish Times here in Ireland. And I wrote Unraveling Motherhood back in 2021. And it was very much reflection on where I had come from, in the sense that I had overcome a decent period of time where I had postnatal depression and anxiety after the birth of my second daughter.
Mhm.
And when I think about it now, and actually when I was thinking about it, when I was writing the book, I had this belief about what parenthood and motherhood was essentially going to be like. And it was only after my experience with my second daughter that I realized that my understanding of what motherhood is and was on my first daughter was very skewed as well. But it took a lot of time to actually overcome what I was experiencing. And unraveling was very cathartic. It was very cathartic to actually get through every single chapter and to unravel all those knots that I like to consider throughout my whole experience, but not only just about the postnatal depression and anxiety that I experienced, but rather my understanding and belief about who I could be as a mother and what I could do as a mother. So that's where it essentially came from. And I don't know if you want me to expand a little bit more on my experience there with postnatal depression and anxiety, because I can talk about that all day.
Before we get too far into it, could you explain the difference between postpartum and postnatal?
Hmm. So for me, for what I experienced was when I was pregnant on my second daughter, I had what I didn't recognize at all as being a postpartum depression, and well, mostly anxiety, to be honest with you. So I was pregnant with her, and at 10 weeks, I suffered from a subchorionic hematoma, which is a bleed. Now, I worked in the Rotunda Hospital, which is the oldest working maternity hospital in Europe. And when it comes to the idea that you would imagine, I was a medical librarian and I did an awful lot of research with students, midwives, anesthetists, obstetricians, gynecologists. I did a huge amount of research with these people, these students. And you'd imagine that maybe I might have had a bit of understanding about what actually happens to a woman during this stage. But I did not know. I had sort of assumed that if you bleed when you're pregnant, you're going to lose your baby.
Mhm.
So I was very lucky in one sense that I was working at the time. So I was in the library and I went directly to one of the anesthetists that was sitting in the library studying at the time. And I just said to him, I'm sorry, can you help me? Because I didn't even know what to do. I said, sorry, can you help me? I'm 10 weeks pregnant and I'm bleeding. So he brought me down to the A&E. And it was from that moment where I felt like I didn't get any kind of understanding or support as to what was happening to me at the time. I was basically told, I would ask the question, am I losing my baby? And the doctor at the time basically just said, oh, I don't know. And it was very flippant. There was absolutely lack of empathy, lack of emotion, lack of discussion. That I sat there in that room while the doctor left and went through. I remember feeling as though I was going through these sort of stages of grief and then, acceptance. And, I literally said, oh, it's okay, we could try again. Or, then I was panicking and worrying that I did something wrong and why was I bleeding? In the end, what occurred was a subchorionic hematoma, which is a bleed kind of above the, if I get this right, I could possibly get this wrong, but I think it's a bleed above the womb as such. So it's not actually within the womb, or they could see it anyway. They could see the bleed and they could see the baby, and the baby was fine.
Mhm.
I've definitely explained that wrong, so don't quote me on that. But because of that situation, I then felt for the rest of my pregnancy that I had to hold the baby in, which created a quite an enormous sense of anxiety within me and worry and stress. And I did not recognize it at all. In fact, no one recognized it. When I look back, I can see that my behavior was quite extreme. It was quite different. It was literally not me, but it was my way of trying to maintain some kind of control and balance and make sure that the baby would be delivered okay. And she was. We were very lucky. She was born in the May of that year. And I had quite an extensive sense of euphoria when she was born, which I attribute to this insane level of relief because she was here. She was finally here and she was safe and she was perfect and everything was okay. However, the anxiety and the depression stayed. So
Mhm.
my the postpartum anxiety that I had while pregnant became postnatal and depression and anxiety. And the anxiety definitely overruled everything in my life at that stage. So it is literally this idea that you can have um, mental health issues when you are pregnant,
Mm.
while everyone's telling you that you should be happy and delighted and isn't pregnancy wonderful and isn't this an amazing experience, and you're really suffering through it, you're really finding it hard, but there's that societal expectation and belief that you should be happy and delighted to be pregnant.
Okay. So you make a good distinction between a lot of times we hear, postpartum depression and anxiety, more depression, I think, than anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting. But we're not always aware that it can happen while being pregnant.
Yeah.
And you talk a lot in your book too about different, beliefs and expectations and the societal expectations. And you purposely named the book Unraveling.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you choose that word and how do we start unraveling?
Yeah, there's a very distinctive theme throughout the book where it is unraveling our beliefs basically around motherhood, but it's also recognizing where all of the kind of the wool is knotted, very much knotted, and we have to try to unpick and unknot those ideas so that we can kind of make sense of them. And then by the end of the book, we're actually stitching up. And I also use the theme of a pattern, that there is no pattern to motherhood, that everybody's experience is different and unique and natural to them. However, we are very much um, guided by the societal expectations, the political, the cultural, the economic and historical issues that all make up our understanding of what motherhood should be. That does not mean that those issues are correct or that we can't unknot them to stitch them back up in a way that suits us. Because again, everybody's individual, everyone's experiences are unique, and we all come from particular backgrounds. And that all makes up who we are. That when we come to motherhood and we're told that it's meant to be this way or that way or one way or another, and it's not fitting up with our expectations, what happens is we blame ourselves that
Mhm.
we're not doing it right. That, gosh, you're not the first mother to have given birth and to have two, three, four children. So why are you finding this hard? A million women have done this before you. What's
Mhm.
different for you? And when we can't break away from all of the societal expectations and everything else that comes with that, like the political and the cultural norms that we're living with, we then are living in very much a guilty, blame-filled, shameful manner of motherhood. And that does not work for anybody.
Right. And you lose a lot of your control over things too, and
Yes.
you feel out of control. So
Mm.
it sounds like the first part of unraveling is kind of thinking about your expectations of what motherhood should be, either yours, society's, everybody's. And that's the first maybe warning sign that we would see in a mom who is about to give birth or, or is pregnant now. Um, what are some of the societal issues that you see? Because I think a lot of our audience is in America or North America, and you're in Ireland. And I know different countries do things very differently.
Mm.
And the more support we can give mothers, the better. And it's interesting you say it, so many people have kids, right? It's a very common, oh, I'm pregnant, oh, I'm having kids. So people don't really think much of it. It happens. But it is a huge issue. And we'll get more into about, the mother's identity. But I think you're right. The first step is, okay, yeah, what are your expectations and what are other people's expectations of me? So what were some that you really felt were misconceptions, I guess, of parenting or things that you felt like I have to do this in order to be a good mom?
Well, when I was saying earlier on that I had this understanding of what I believed motherhood was when I had my first child, and then when I had my second child, that sort of really upended everything for me. What it actually did was it made me question a lot of those societal expectations. So when I had my first daughter, I had this un unnerving sense of this belief that I literally had to be able to do everything. And I remember I remember not feeling confident enough to question everything around me. So I believed that everybody else knew better than I did because my confidence was low, but also um, I don't feel like we need to go into motherhood and be confident that we can mother. Because I think that there's two different things there. There's motherhood and then there's the job of mothering, which are two very different elements. So I couldn't, or at least I didn't at the time, differentiate between the two. Motherhood and mothering were the same things to me. I also believed that because I believed everybody else knew better than me, I never questioned what anybody else did. So I remembered, and I think I mentioned some of the incidences in my book where people would do things that I personally wouldn't have felt were right with a child. Like, you know, for me personally, there was one incident I can think of is where a friend basically put her thumb into my daughter's mouth as a soother. And I remember thinking, God, that you don't do that. Like the dirt that could be on that fingernail, like, and yet she was, holding my child and doing this, which was against what I believed in, and yet I didn't stop her
Mm,
because there was this idea of you need to have a village and anybody that helps you is good help, is good support. So I allowed everybody else almost take over my child
mm,
and um and parent her in ways that I would never have parented her. And over time my confidence did grow. But it did take a lot of it sort of it did take until my second child was born to realize that I could actually stand up for myself and say, no, that's not how we do it in this household. And that kind of builds a thick skin. But when you're looking at the differences between potentially Ireland and America, I just feel like worldwide we are very much consumed with social media. And I know this conversation is had repeatedly, but unless you tune out of the perfect ideology of motherhood, you cannot find your own version of it.
mhm.
And that's what you really need to dip into because no one's motherhood is going to be the same because we're all individual people. How you mother your child is going to be different, but how you mother yourself is also going to be different. And what you need as well. So we all come from those different backgrounds and we all need certain different things. So when you see one person up on social media who has it all, um, and they have a career, they have a child, two or one or two children, and they're making memories, and you're looking at yourself going, well, I have that too, but I am struggling. I am finding it really, really hard. What is wrong with me?
Mm.
And that is the reflection that we get. We see this perfect understanding of motherhood online. We hear it from our friends because not that we're not allowed, but we're afraid almost to complain. We're afraid to actually say some of the bad conversations. The conversation of motherhood, of mothering rage, is blossoming over the last few years. And I love to hear the conversation because when my first daughter was born 12 years ago, you never mentioned that you were angry, because to be an angry mother was to be a bad mother. So we're given all of these um, juxtapositions of motherhood, and yet we're told that we're wrong. So we can love our children, but hate the mothering of it, that side of it. And, until we kind of feel that we can unknot a lot of these stitches that aren't working for us, we're not going to find capacity for both ourselves and our children.
Hmm. So it's really being honest with yourself, and it would be more beneficial for everybody if everybody was honest about
Yeah.
mothering and motherhood and parenting, and that it's not easy by any means. But that doesn't mean that you don't love your child. But right, if
Yeah.
people had more open conversations about this part is really difficult for me, or I enjoy this part, or this part's tough, I think that would make people's confidence go up and realize, right, you don't have to be a perfect mother. Nobody's perfect. But
I do
you
I
said,
do think that the idea of the perfect mother and trying to balance that and try to be that, there is no idea of perfect. We know that. We understand that there actually is no idea of perfect in any aspect of our lives. But the idea that we can have honest conversations is really, really difficult. We do have more conversations about maternal mental well-being and mothering and fathering and parenting and solo parenting. We do have a lot more of those conversations now than we ever did before, but it's still not enough. We still hear, the same conversations, and we go back again to trying to be that perfect idea. So it is until we actually close ourselves off in some ways to the negatively impacting methods of motherhood or fatherhood that we get, until we close our minds off to that and allow ourselves to look inward and look at our own lives and our own individual circumstances, that
mhm,
things begin to shift. And I'm not saying this is something that can be done on a weekend. It's absolutely not. I'm still unraveling, and I do believe I will always be unraveling when it comes to parenting my children, because every stage changes.
mhm,
And as they grow older and their stages change, my stage changes.
right.
Um, and so I will still be unraveling. Everybody will still be unraveling as they go along, but it is being intentional about that
Mhm.
change and making that change.
Right. And having that confidence to self-reflect.
Yeah.
And right, instead of being the perfect mom, how about, the aim is to be, you know, maybe the perfect mom for your child, because every child is different too, and your parenting has to adjust.
Yeah.
Now, in the book, you talk about connection. Is it connection over perfection?
Connection, not perfection.
Connection, not perfection, which I think is a great mantra for all moms and parents to
It
have.
is. It
What do
is.
you hope kind of the focus is with that, if people take that as, a saying they can repeat to themselves?
Well, first of all, I can't claim that. Those aren't my words. Dr. Mary O'Kane, I worked with her on two of her books here in Ireland. I was her editor, and so she has two books, and one of them is like about imperfect parenting, and it is about connection, not perfection. And she very much runs with this idea, which, the idea of the good enough parent, and to really connect with your child rather than try to be what try to be the best that they can have, because that does not we can't achieve that. We actually can't. So Donald Winnicott, um basically back in, I think it was the 1950s, coined the term good enough, good enough parent, and it is essentially about doing your best And actually, that is more beneficial for your child because your child needs to see you fail as well. Um, and if we stop trying to be 100%, we actually have more time, more energy, more spirituality, more guidance to offer our children, rather than attempting to give them everything. Because when we do that, we actually negate what we need ourselves. And when we start forgetting about our own needs, I call it the sideboard of lost intentions. And, it is literally saying, I need to do this for myself today, putting it down, saying I'll come back to it later, and never coming back to it. So when I do that, I'm not filling my own cup. I'm not embracing what I need for my child, or when I'm not embracing what I need for me to give to what I can offer my child. And it's a full circle kind of moment. So that when we can be as good enough for ourselves, for our children, it's a lot more beneficial for everybody all around.
Hmm. Right. We do have one question. Did the father have any idea what you were experiencing?
Great question. So interestingly, um, when I was pregnant on our second child and I was beginning to have these anxious feelings, I hid them very, very well. And it ended up, so I was on maternity leave for the full year. In the end, I ended up leaving my job in the Rotunda and working from home, created a career for myself as a writer and an editor and a mentor out of that, which was amazing. But in that first year, I hid everything from him completely. So it was kind of a double-edged sword. So 2 weeks after my daughter was born, my sister and my mother both recognized that my behavior was erratic and very much not myself. There was an incident where myself and my sister were out with our two daughters, my two daughters, and her daughter and son. And I overreacted to a situation. And, even in the moment, at the heat of the moment, I knew that wasn't me. But at the same time, I forgave myself for my explosive reaction and justified why I did it. But it was then my sister spoke with my mother, and the two of them, it was almost, the two of them caught me and basically said, there's something up here. You need help. And I went to get help. I had a chat with my husband, chat with my mom and dad and my sister, and I went to get help. However, did not receive the support that I needed at the time. So this was 2 weeks postpartum. And it was at the 6 week. So basically, when I went to my GP, my actual GP wasn't there and I had a locum. And I was completely fobbed off. I will never forget the sentence of being told, well, you can have medication if you want to. And it was almost like my experience was not good enough for intervention. Um, so anyway, I didn't want to go on medication. It wasn't the route that I wanted to go down. And 6 weeks, it was a 6 week checkup where the kind of the district nurse came out to do a few checks on the baby, and she asked me, how are you, mum? And that's when things changed for me, and I started getting counselling, which really worked for me. So I think that was about 6 weeks, sorry, 6 months then, where I was receiving counseling. My husband was very, very supportive, always very supportive of me, and would always talk to me afterwards about, the counseling session and anything that I needed. However, it was a year after our daughter was born when I had the most catastrophic anxiety attack in our kitchen. And I was having 30 plus anxiety and panic attacks a day previously to this. But this was the very first one that he had seen. And it broke him to finally see what I was experiencing because I hid every single panic attack, anxiety attack, overreaction, distressing issue. I used to hurt myself. I hid everything from him because I was judgmental, I was shameful, I was riddled with guilt, full of blame. Um, was worried that my children would be taken from me, that he would leave me. So I had a lot of negative thinking happening that was pulling me deeper and deeper into the depression. And yet, this is the problem with this, is that as soon as he discovered what was occurring for me, because he physically saw it, that's when things started to change for me.
Hmm.
Because there's a thing where I'm in the middle of an anxiety attack and I am running away. I am abandoning everything as much as I possibly can. I always felt my children were safe. I was my rage and my energy was very much going internally into me, yet I couldn't contain it long term. There was no way I could have maintained this for years. Now I did for 3 years. This is how long it went on for in the end. Um, but he did this thing that whenever he saw um, signs that something was happening for me or that I was not coping well, and he could literally see it written on my face where I wasn't even aware that it was happening until it got to a certain stage. But he could literally see it on my face and he would just, surround me with concern and love and respect and everything else that I needed. And he would hold me so tight until the panic kind of dissipated. And I get quite emotional when I think about it because I remember how hard and difficult it was for me in those moments. And then I think about how it was affecting my family. And it does make you feel less than, um, which is why I hid it as much as I possibly could. I almost hid it from myself. I didn't
Hmm.
want to recognize that I was going through this in a
Hmm.
lot of ways. So
Right.
yes, he did. He eventually knew, but didn't know to the extent.
Hmm.
And it all comes down to communication in the end. But
Right.
there are very fearful thoughts that you don't want to communicate. You don't even want to recognize that they're there.
So, building on that experience, what was it like those first couple of sessions with a therapist for you? And what do you think, like I said, most of the audience are, behavioral health professionals. What do you think we need? What tools do we need to best help a mom in that situation? And also, other family members, a father, and how to get that, like holistic approach and best support for everybody.
So I think when I was first asked by the public health nurse that day on the 6 week checkup, when she and I because I wasn't expecting it, I believed that she had come. I always believed that anybody who, all through pregnancy and the 6 weeks after pregnancy, when the baby was born, I believed every single appointment was in favor of the child. I never imagined that it was actually the care of me, which is why I think that the anxiety kind of really amped up when I thought we were losing her. Um, and then when I started going to counseling, well, so when she asked me, "And how are you, mum?" What were her exact words? I crumpled. I absolutely just
Hmm.
liquefied because I wasn't expecting it. And that was the beginning point of kind of a change for me because she gave me the contact details for a counselor. If she hadn't given me the contact details, I don't think I would have gone down that route. I
Hmm.
didn't know what route I could have gone down. As I say, my GP didn't want to, or the locum in the GP practice at the time did not want to discuss it with me. Um, so I didn't know what my options were. I didn't know. I thought maybe I would just get out of it, eventually. And looking back, there was no way I would have just got out of it.
Hmm.
So when I started counseling, it was an interesting experience because I would bring my daughter. My eldest daughter was in school, and my or like play school, and my baby was with me. Well, I would bring her down to my mother and father's house, and they would mind her while I was down at counseling. So I would come back, and I would be very raw, and I would be feeling a lot of things that I was not able to really work through just yet. And my parents are very patient. On the one side, my mother is very caring, and she would come from a very holistic space, and my father was very logical.
Mhm.
So I would have this conversation with them afterwards. They would feed me, they would comfort me, they would hold the baby so that I could still be with myself as such. So I felt a lot of care at that stage. We would have discussions. But it was difficult. I will never forget how difficult it was to begin opening up. Um, and I went to counseling for quite a while until I found that the conversation was not benefiting me because the conversation was morphing into areas that I was running away from, I suppose. It's only when I look back on it that I realized that more counseling sessions would have been better off for me. Because we were getting to a stage where we were almost going through that unraveling and trying to stitch everything up for myself. But I was being pulled into a space that was a little bit too deep for me while suffering quite heavily. I was still having 30 plus of panic attacks a day. I was still wishing that I never had to leave the house. I couldn't make phone calls. I didn't want to organize anything to happen in the house. I couldn't have workmen in. Nothing was being done because I had control over the rooms in my home and slightly over the rooms in my head and our schedule, where I would go and pick up the child from play school. We'd come home, we'd have lunch. My husband would come home, we'd have dinner, and everything was very rigidly kind of organized for me. So I had to have control over that. And when the conversations in counseling felt as though I wasn't in control anymore, that's when things sort of became a little difficult for me. And I did stop going to counseling. I do think that if I had carried on, it would have been much more beneficial for me.
Mhm.
But I don't know how, um, you can't drag someone to counseling. I did get I got a phone call asking, because I didn't book in sessions, and she did phone me and say, and it was coming up to Christmas, so it felt like a very kind of convenient time to break off. And that was just an excuse. But I felt, I'm done. And she asked, would you like to come back? Um, no, I think I'm okay now.
Mhm.
And that's all I had to say to stop counseling sessions. I never got a single follow-up call after that.
Mhm.
And it reminds me as well of the Edinburgh postnatal scale test that's done. I don't know if they do this in America, um, where you answer a questionnaire just before you leave with your baby from the hospital. And if you had read my score when I was leaving with my second daughter, there's no way you'd have let me leave. I was not in a place to leave. And I did not get a single follow-up call.
I know it's amazing to think once you give birth, they just think, here, well, here's your baby and good luck. Well, we were talking about other countries. Are you familiar? Finland has a baby box. Have you heard of
Oh,
this?
yes, the baby box. Yes, I had only heard of that a couple of years ago.
Yeah, they've done it since like the 40s, and it's
Yeah,
literally a box, so the baby could actually sleep in the box, but it's different resources, diapers, and it's a nice kind of introduction, I guess, to motherhood,
yeah.
at least a part of it. Um, but it's funny you mentioned too, because a lot of my clients will say that turning point for them was they went to a doctor's office or a midwife, and they would say, how are things going? And like, to your point, it was always, oh, the baby's sleeping, the baby's eating. And I remember
Mm,
this one client said, but then the doctor looked at me and said, no, how are you doing? And she goes, oh, that was my opportunity to get everything out because everybody is so focused on the baby, which I understand. But it's also, you as a new mom in that identity shift. And you
mm,
mentioned before that sometimes, and in the book too, motherhood triggers certain things in somebody. And if you've had experience with any depression or anxiety before, or not even, because sometimes you can have the postpartum without the history of anything else. Um, how hard is it to manage? And what do you think clinicians can do for moms who are still struggling so much? Because if you're struggling kind of individually, right? If we have sometimes difficulty with emotional regulation, our own anxiety, our own depression, and then you add another person into it, like we're kind of familiar with it when it comes to relationships, right? We always tell our clients, it's hard to manage someone else's emotions. But in a relationship, you can usually walk away from it if it gets too, intense. When you have a child, you can't walk away from it. So, as a clinician, how do we best support the mom as an individual and then also as a mom? But I know in the book you talk a lot about self-care as a mom. And I always
Mm,
tell clients being selfish isn't necessarily a bad thing. And
mm,
remember, it's always about balance. It's not all or nothing. It's not, oh, I'm never going to watch my child and I'm just going to go to the spa every day or I'm going to do that. Like, that's not what we're talking about when it talks about self-care. But if you yourself don't have those coping skills to kind of reset and balance and regulate, how are
mm.
you supposed to help another small human regulate if you're not? So, coming from the clinical perspective, what do you think, even in hindsight, would have helped you more in those moments of your first counseling?
Yeah, I think we had some pretty amazing chats in those sessions. And I'll never forget the second session where I was told, and I have it in the book, where I was told to write a list. And the list first had to contain the things that when I wake up in the morning, what I want to do or what I need to do. So I get up in the morning, I have to make the beds, get the kids up, get them dressed, get them washed, fed, ready to go, bring the kids to school. And then it was, so I would make a list of everything that I was going to do that day. And then I was told to write a second list. And this was at the end of the day. And the list, I had to add on everything else that I did that day. So put the washing on, made the dinner, made dinner for a week and froze everything, went shopping, went to the dentist, everything else that you do on that day so that you can actually see how much you actually achieve on one single day as not only as a person but as a mother as well, and the mental load and everything else that occurs for that. And this gives us um, almost a sense of worth that we're needed in a lot of ways. Okay. And being needed is one thing, but but for someone else to recognize our needs is the most important thing.
Mhm.
So unfortunately, there is a huge weight, or a badly divided weight of the mental load, when it comes to a heteronormative relationship. And it does also happen in other relationships, but let's just take mother or father for the moment. There's always one parent who holds the mental load more so than anybody else.
Yes.
I am that parent.
And it's usually
Um,
the mom. I mean, right or wrong, it usually
it is
is
usually
the
the
mom.
mom. It
Mhm.
is. Because we are ingrained in that way. We are built to be that. The patriarchal society has inbuilt within us that that is our lifelong job. In
Mhm.
fact, it builds in this idea that you're not a good woman if you don't have a child.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of different things that we could discuss about that. But when we look at everything that we do in one day, and when she brought this idea up to me, it really opened my mind to sort of say, well, that's exhausting. That's really, really tiring having to do that day in, day out, and for it to shift and change, and for your mind to have to hold all of that information. Um, that if we don't recognize our own needs and inbuild something in our lives that is going to give back to us. So it's the filling your cup kind of idea again. My problem with self-care is that it is so commercialized.
Mhm.
Um, like you cannot buy self-care. It actually doesn't exist in that manner. If you believe that buying yourself a face serum or scented candles or incense or chocolate bars or glasses of wine, if you believe that that's what self-care is, you haven't dug deep enough to see what you truly need in your life.
Mhm.
And for me, a lot of and this is another discussion I had with my counselor as well, was building boundaries,
Mhm.
allowing ourselves to recognize where our boundaries need to sit. And I started doing this very, very, very young. So my eldest would have been, I'd say, 5 at the time. Our youngest was 4. Oh, sorry, 1. So it's about 3.5 years between the two of them. So a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old. And they started to see that, you know what, when Mammy has her colors out and her mindful coloring in book, she's sitting here and she's with you, but she's focused on this right now. You guys can play around her, and she will, for me, it was a sense of just a breathing space. That's all that was for me at that time. A
Well, and
breathing space
but you also did it with your
with
children,
them.
which is
Yeah,
great. It doesn't
yeah,
have to be separate. It can be, and then
exactly.
the social learning there,
Yeah,
you're teaching your children then how to have that
yeah.
self-care, which is great. And then it's not like oh, I have to have the kids away to be able to have this self-care.
No,
You can have it
with
together.
them. And
Right.
that was it. That was quite a huge turning point as well when I started believe or recognizing that, I have to be with my kids. They are young. I don't want to be in a separate room to them because I'm afraid of what might happen, or I still have to watch the 1 year old because she's cruising around the whole room and she might fall and hurt herself or whatever. But to recognize that actually you don't have to be away from your children is quite empowering. That you can, but it's actually building the boundaries with your kids. So I remember the one thing that really frustrated me and was kind of like a trigger for some of my anxiety was the touching, being constantly held and touched and in my face, and all of that was very, very hard to manage on a day-to-day basis. So I would have very clear rules with my kids that this is my space, right here is my space, and that's your space. You do not have to be on my space.
Mhm.
And I built that with them very, very young, and it just became a thing. And it was they recognized that actually my eldest daughter would do that with my youngest daughter. It's my space,
Right.
so,
Well, and that's
but it
good.
was
They know
really
their
good.
personal space too, then.
Absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely. And now even to this day, they're 12 and 8, almost 9 at the moment, and they if they see me sitting by the fire with a book in my hand, they know mom's reading, mom's taking a break. I'm also specifying to them that list. I'm also saying, guys, I'm exhausted. This is what I've done today while you were in school. And they actually are seeing how much of the mental load and how much of the physical aspects of the caring for the house, caring for them is landed on me. So much so that now they don't, I don't have to force them to clean their room or take
Mhm.
out the hoover and do a bit of hoovering. They will
Right.
actually tidy up. And this is because I've actually encouraged them to see. And I think because they're girls as well, I'm very conscious of the women that they're going to grow up to be, that they, recognizing that you are allowed to have downtime, you are allowed to have space for yourself, that it does not all have to fall on your shoulders. And yes, chocolate is great and that kind of thing. But, you know, the self-care that really works is the things that give you opportunity and space and the belief that you can just sit with your own thoughts for a short while or breathe, um, and and find some kind of space within yourself to say, I'm okay right now. I have had a good day despite it being quite busy and quite hectic. Everything is okay. So my nervous system is leveled out in a lot of ways.
Right. And I like the list idea because it's really acknowledging and
Yeah.
realizing everything that you are doing. Because as you talk in the book too about different identities, when you become a mom, like we said, usually it is the mom that takes on the housekeeping role, the cook
Mm.
role, the chauffeur role, the planning every family event role. And you have all these different roles, but then you also have, if you have a job, if you have interests, if you volunteer, and how you get, there was always that saying, like, you can have it all. And not in a negative way, but I don't think you can have it all at the same time. You can't possibly give 100% to everything. And that's okay. But right, it has to come with that acknowledgement and understanding of this is my life right now. Like you said, it changes because kids grow up and their needs change, but you're learning how to best manage it, in the phase that you're in. And in the book, you talk about a parental pause, which I think everybody could use. So explain that to us, and hopefully we can bring that to our clients who are moms too, because I think it's very
Yeah.
useful.
Yeah, the parental pause is really interesting because it's the react versus response idea where if you have, and I think we're all guilty of reacting to triggering elements. triggering issues that occur for us. And I had an awful lot of triggers. I still have a lot of triggers. I mean, I don't think you can be a parent and not have triggers. um, but if you instantly react to something that is upsetting you, you are going to hurt yourself internally and you're going to hurt your children in some manner because the reaction is usually not connected with what's actually happening. So if your child breaks a plate and you jump down their throat and you're giving out to them and saying horrible things to them because they accidentally broke a plate, we're reacting. Whereas if you pause for 3 seconds, you are then responding. You're not going to jump in with that immediate emotional reaction that you might have, which is probably not the best way to manage the situation. But by taking that parental pause or any kind of pause where you just stop and breathe for 3 seconds and say, okay, that's fine. It's just a plate.
Mhm.
That we can kind of put things into perspective. We can react or respond in a way that is not that emotional charge and sit with it and say, it's all right, tell your child it's okay, clean it all up, make sure no one's hurt. And there's no upheaval then. There's no stress in your body. There's no stress in your child's body. So that it gives that aspect of responding to a situation in not necessarily the correct manner, but in a better way
Mhm.
than reacting and things all getting worse than a broken plate.
Right. You also mentioned laughter as a stress management tool. Are there
Yeah.
other, how would our clients and our moms use that every day? And do you have other strategies that might help?
I think everything in life, there needs to be an element of play. We spent a lot of our years dancing in the kitchen. And any time that I felt like there was some kind of reaction bubbling up within me, I would instantly put on, we had this CD that it was a compilation of all of our favorite songs. And I would basically put that CD on, and the three of us, because my husband would be at work, and the three of us would just dance in the kitchen. And it was almost like an energy release
Mm.
um, by having that playful side of me. It lifted my spirits. It actually got me out of a lot of anxious feelings and stressful
Mhm.
feelings. Um, and definitely helped in that way. But it's not just so the movement of the body is always helpful, but it's that idea of laughter and enjoyment and play. So we have, our kids are, as I say, 12 and almost 9, and we've been playing board games with them, quite intricate kind of board games as well, and card games for years. Our youngest daughter was 4 when she started picking up the idea of how to play games. And it's always, it would be almost like 3 or 4 times a week where we still play games because the kids still ask us.
Mhm.
And we're just always like laughing and having fun. And yet I will admit that I can't always do that. So my husband, there's a good balance, I suppose, in our lives where my husband is the energetic one and I'm not.
Mhm.
Just straight up not. So he would be almost nightly, the three of them would be playing this strange football game in the kitchen. And I would be in the sitting room reading because I would take his connection with the kids as my time for myself. And it works really, really well. But the cackles and laughter and joy that comes from out of the kitchen is absolutely immense. Now they might only play for 5 to 10 minutes, but it's actually enough to actually create a deeper connection between them,
Right.
and also lighten the whole entire household.
Mhm.
I genuinely do believe that building an element of play within our parenting is one of the most supportive things that you can do for yourself and for your family because it lightens so much within us.
Right. I agree. And again, it's you're doing it with your
With
children and getting that, when your husband or your partner was doing it too, right? Instead of seeing it as, oh, I'm not included or this is my rest time, because sometimes people still feel guilty about, resting or
yeah,
doing something on their own. You
yeah,
view it, right, as this is a great bonding time for them,
yeah.
that I don't need to be a part of right now, which I think can help give moms a little bit more, respite when needed.
And I do
Um,
think that the idea of guilt, we have to drop guilt.
mhm,
Guilt is not something that we build up on ourselves. It is given to us from so many different areas, whether it is, the kind of social aspect or the political aspect, whatever it is, it comes from something else. Our guilt, we do not have to be guilty about needing time for ourselves or saying no to our kids or building boundaries with them. We need to do those sort of things. So if we can begin with that idea of banishing guilt from our lives
mhm.
and allowing ourselves to have and to give in whatever manner works for our family, that will be really, really important for us.
Right. So we're
Mm.
coming up on an hour, so if anybody has any final questions, feel free to put it in the chat. But Geraldine, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And it sounds like acceptance, self-reflection, confidence, support, asking for help, all kind of a good recipe for balanced, kind of happy, content motherhood.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Kortney.
Thank you for being here. And I hope everybody will join us next month for our other clinical conversation. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day.